Welcome to Hollywood Graveyard. Today I turn the camera over to you, the Hollywood Graveyard community, as we travel the world to visit famous and historical graves in your neck of the woods. Together we'll span the globe to remember legends and historical figures like Avicii, Josephine Baker, Zsa Zsa Gabor, Roger Moore, and many more. My friends, the time is yours. Welcome to round 3 of the Viewers Special. If you've followed our channel for a while, you know that every few years we open up to video submissions from you, the Hollywood Graveyard community, of famous graves around the world that are beyond my reach. If you're keeping track, this first video in this third series is the 18th episode of our Viewers Special. We received more than 2,000 videos this time around. A huge thank you to everyone who submitted. I'll try to include as many as I can, but with numbers like that, please keep in mind that it will be impossible to include them all. Today's journey will take us through parts of Europe, Asia, Australia, and South America. Let's begin today in Stockholm, Sweden. For decades, Sweden has been something of a popular music hit factory, and our first star today was a big part of that legacy. We're at Hedvig Eleonora Church Cemetery, the final resting place of Tim Bergling, better known as Avicii. He was a DJ and record producer who rose to prominence in 2011 with his single Levels. His style was marked by the unique blending of electronic music with other musical genres and elements. He had an international hit with the track Wake Me Up with Aloe Black.
So wake me up when it's all over.
He would receive 2 Grammy nominations throughout his career. In 2016, Avicii quit touring, battling with mental health issues. He died by suicide in 2018 at just 28. His final album, Tim, was released posthumously. His funeral was held at the same cemetery where Greta Garbo is laid to rest, after which he was interred here. Our next Stockholm stop is Katarina Cemetery. Here lies Michael Nyqvist, a noted Swedish actor. He rose to prominence in film and television here, including in the TV series Beck. He rose to international fame, playing villainous types in Hollywood films, including Hendrix in Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol, and Viggo Tarasov in John Wick. He also starred as Mikkel in the original Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Michael died from lung cancer in 2017 at just 56. Nearby is the grave of a popular Swedish folk artist, Cornelis Vreeswijk, thought of as something of a Swedish John Denver. His songs and poetry would become standards in Swedish culture. By the time of his death at age 50 from liver cancer, he had become a major music icon in Sweden. A movie was made about his life, titled Cornelis. Neighboring Nordic nation Norway also has a proud musical heritage, and one of the biggest names in Norwegian folk and classical music enjoys this eternal view overlooking a fjord near his home in Trollhaugen. Entombed in this cliffside cave is Edvard Grieg. You may not know his name, but I promise you've heard his music. His best-known work is the Peer Gynt Suite, written as incidental music for Henrik Ibsen's 1867 play Peer Gynt. It contains those instantly recognizable pieces Morning Mood, Anitra's Dance, and In the Hall of the Mountain King. Other popular pieces include his piano concerto and various sonatas for strings. His work made him something of a national hero in Norway. After his death at age 64, a funeral march he composed was played at his funeral. He was cremated, his urn and ashes placed here in this mountain crypt, later being joined by his wife. In the city of Bergen, at the Assistens Cemetery, we find the grave of another musical legend, Ulla Boll, a man who was a mentor to Edvard Grieg. He was something of a rock star of his day, hailed as one of the greatest violinists of his era. He was virtuosic in the speed and clarity of his violin playing. Boll toured the world performing, including in the US, where he found great success. Ulla Boll's death in 1880 at age 70 and his funeral were marked by a national day of mourning here in Norway. Turning the compass west, we get to experience a rare sight on this channel, the beautiful landscape of a snow-covered cemetery. We're in Iceland now, at a cemetery you'll forgive me if I don't try to pronounce. This is the grave of Cecilia Sigmundsdottir. She was a pedagogue trained in child nursing and kindergarten management. Cecilia would become a pioneer in the care and treatment of the mentally disabled. She founded the Solheimer community, which offered shelter and education to disabled and neglected children. Solheimer, which means Home of the Sun, has become an eco-village renowned for its ecological, artistic, and international community ethics. For her work, Cecilia was recognized on Iceland's postage stamp in 2002. Let's hop a plane back to continental Europe and Copenhagen, Denmark. This is Assistens Cemetery, where numerous notable Danes are interred, including Hans Christian Andersen, who we visited last time here. Also here is another notable Hans Christian, this one a scientist named Hans Christian Ørsted. He was a physicist and chemist who discovered that electrical currents create magnetic fields, establishing what we know as electromagnetism. This he discovered when he noticed the needle of a compass turn parallel to a wire carrying an electrical current. Ørsted also made contributions to chemistry, including his preparation of metallic aluminum. He lived to be 73. Next up here we find a grave adorned with pens, not an uncommon sight for notable writers, as was Dan Turèll. Also known as Uncle Danny, Turèll was an influential Danish author of novels, poetry, spoken word, and prose. Some of his books were made into movies, including Murder in Paradise and Murder in the Dark. Dan was just 47 when he died from cancer. Let's follow this sign to our last Denmark stop, a noted philosopher named Søren Kierkegaard. He's generally regarded as the father of existentialism, which explores the issue, purpose, and value of human existence, what it means to be an existing finite human being. Søren was prolific in his writing on the subjects of philosophy, theology, ethics, psychology, etc. His ideas and writings would have a major influence on philosophy, theology, and Western culture in general. He was just 42 when he died in 1855. Next up is Germany. Almost exactly 1 year ago, we were here in Germany to shoot our short film, The Tomb of Nosferatu. Germany has a strong place in the history of cinema, and also some of the most magnificent cemeteries in the world. So it's great to be back. We'll start at Dudenhofen Cemetery in Hesse to find the grave of Jean Darling. She was a child star in the early days of Hollywood. She made her debut in the 1927 Our Gang silent short Bring Home the Turkey. Jean would go on to appear in dozens of Our Gang shorts and even some feature films, including playing Jane Eyre as a child in 1934's Jane Eyre. In the 40s, she shifted her focus to the stage, performing on Broadway. Notable roles include as Carrie in Carousel in some 850 performances. Later in life, she lived in Germany with her son. At the time of her death in 2015, at age 93, she was one of the last surviving performers from the silent era. Her epitaph reads, "A star so close and yet so far." Our next stop is the Frankfurt Central Cemetery. Here lies Arthur Schopenhauer, another of Europe's most influential philosophers. He was a proponent of irrationalism, which argues that the universe is not a rational space, and is well known for his 1818 work, The World as Will and Representation. Schopenhauer was among the first Western philosophers to adopt tenets of Eastern philosophy, like Hinduism and Buddhism. He's been described as the artist's philosopher, given his influence on artists of all stripes. He's also known for the philosophy of pessimism. He died in 1860 at age 72. Also here in Frankfurt is a physician named Alois Alzheimer. He was a German neuropathologist who identified and first published about pre-senile dementia. While working in an asylum to assist mentally ill women, he and others, including mentor Emil Kraepelin, conducted research into the pathology of the nervous system. In 1901, he identified the first case of what would become known as Alzheimer's disease in a woman named Augusta Dieter, publishing his findings in 1906. The disease would later be named after him. The identification of the disease was the first important step to discover the causes and work toward developing treatments and cures, efforts which continue to this day. Let's head to Luxembourg, the small landlocked country between Germany and France. Did you know that here in Luxembourg there is an American World War II cemetery? It's home to more than 5,000 American war dead. Resting here alongside his men is one of World War II's most legendary and colorful military leaders, General George S. Patton. The four-star general commanded the 7th Army in the Mediterranean Theater and the 3rd Army in France and Germany. Under his leadership, the 3rd Army made rapid advances across France and took the lead during the Battle of the Bulge, eventually driving deep into Nazi Germany by the end of the war. Patton was one of the war's most colorful figures, known for his hard-driving personality and vulgarity-laden speeches. During Allied occupation after the war, Patton continued to serve in the region, but died from injuries sustained in an auto accident in Germany. He was laid to rest here alongside the wartime casualties from the 3rd Army, to honor his request to be buried with his men. An award-winning film was made about his life titled Patton. It won 7 Oscars, including for George C. Scott, who portrayed General Patton. Continuing northwest, we reach Belgium and the wooden sarcophagus of rocker Luc de Vos in Cumparsita Cemetery. He's best remembered as lead vocalist and lyricist for the band Gorky, beginning in the early 90s with popular hits like Mia. He also made occasional appearances on Flemish television. He was just 52 and he died from organ failure. Also here in Camposanto is the unique grave of Mark Sleen. He was a Belgian cartoonist known for his comic The Adventures of Nero and Company. The comic debuted in 1947 and appeared continuously until 2002. His Nero character appears here on his grave, as well as a table with waffles, which Nero loved and played a major role in the comic. Mark lived to be 93. In 2021, we did a famous grave tour here in Switzerland, featuring notables like Charlie Chaplin, Audrey Hepburn, and Richard Burton. We're back today to find a few more stars here with the help of you, the viewers. This is Bursens Cemetery in the Lake Geneva area. Here lies Peter Ustinov. The British-born actor and raconteur was a regular feature on the big and small screens. He received numerous accolades, including 4 Oscar nominations, winning for Spartacus and Topkapi as Best Supporting Actor.
Gods must be saving you for some great enterprise.
You think so? Anyone who believes that I'll turn informer for nothing's a fool. I bore the whip without complaint.
Other notable films include Quo Vadis as Nero, Death on the Nile as Poirot, and Logan's Run. And you Disney fans will know him as the voice of Prince John and King Richard in Robin Hood. Ustinov was very much a Renaissance man, also writing and directing a number of films and stage productions. Peter Ustinov died from heart failure at age 82. Northeast of Lake Geneva is Gruyere Cemetery. Here we find the grave of H.R. Giger, an artist whose marker reflects his distinctive style. He was known for airbrushed images that melded human physiques with machines, a style known as biomechanical. Giger is particularly well known for his work as part of the special effects team for the 1979 film Alien, specifically designing the title Alien figure. The work won him an Oscar. Giger's art can be seen on numerous album covers, guitars, and he even designed a microphone stand for Jonathan Davis of Korn. He died in 2014 at age 74 after suffering a fall. In the Zurich area is Rehalp Cemetery. This is the grave of Bruno Ganz, an actor of stage, film, and television whose career spanned 60 years. He was a popular figure in German cinema, but also earned international acclaim, perhaps most notably for playing Adolf Hitler in the Oscar-nominated film Downfall. Other notable films include Wings of Desire, Unknown, and Nosferatu the Vampire, playing Jonathan Harker. He's also remembered for playing Faust, both on stage and screen. Bruno died from cancer at age 77. Also here in Zurich is Fluntern Cemetery. Let's follow the signs to find James Joyce, one of the 20th century's most influential authors. He was an Irish novelist, poet, and literary critic who contributed to the modernist avant-garde movement. He challenged what a traditional novel could be with works like Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake. Other works include the semi-autobiographical A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, and the short story collection Dubliners. His writings have been adapted on screen numerous times. Though born in Dublin, where most of his stories were set, James Joyce traveled extensively and spent his final years in Zurich. He died after surgery for an ulcer at age 58. His grave here features a seated portrait statue of the author. Moving on to France now, which we also visited in 2021, spending time in one of the most famous cemeteries in the world, Père Lachaise. There's always more to discover here, like the lipstick-stained grave of Alain Bashung, Parisians showing love for one of their most cherished singers. Alain is credited for helping revive the French chanson, rising to prominence in the 80s and 90s with hits like Gabby Oh Gabby, Immortals, and La Nuit Je Mens. He also appeared in films like Felix and Lola. Alain remains the most awarded artist in the history of France's music awards. He died from lung cancer at age 61. Next up here we find a poet and storyteller named Apollinaire. He is regarded as one of the foremost poets of the early 20th century who bucked convention and imbued a modernist approach into his poetry, like writing without punctuation and forming the words of his poems into shapes on the page, like the Eiffel Tower. He was an impassioned proponent of the Cubism and Surrealism art movements that swept Europe in the early 20th century. He published 2 major books of poetry, Alcools and Calligrams, and also several novels and plays, a number of which have been adapted on screen. While serving as an infantry officer in World War I, Apollinaire was wounded in the head by shrapnel, from which he would never fully recover. The war weakened Apollinaire died 2 years later during the 1918 influenza pandemic. He was 38. This is the grave of an author and woman of letters known mononymously as Colette. The early 20th century writer is known for her earthy and sensual style, deep connections to nature, and portrayals of the lives of women. Her best-known work is her 1944 novella Gigi, which was the basis for the 9-time Academy Award-winning 1958 film of the same name. It was also made into a stage play. Colette wrote numerous novels, novellas, short stories, and even contributed to screenplays for French films. She lived to be 81 and was the first French woman of letters to be given a state funeral. Colette's life was dramatized in a 2018 film starring Keira Knightley as Colette. Moving on, we find the grave of Gaspard Ulliel. He was a French actor who appeared in more than 50 film and TV productions throughout his career. He won the César Award for Most Promising Actor for his role in the 2004 film A Very Long Engagement. Gaspard also played young Hannibal in Hannibal Rising, and Yves Saint Laurent in the biopic Saint Laurent. One of his last roles was in Marvel's Moon Knight, but his career was cut tragically short when he died from a skiing accident at just 37. Ghulam Hossein Saedi is regarded as one of Iran's most prolific and notable writers. He used the power of the pen to battle repressive regimes within his writings, which included novels, short stories, plays, and screenplays. One of his most notable works is the screenplay for the 1969 film The Cow, which helped usher in the new wave of Iranian cinema. In 1974, Ghulam was arrested and tortured for his writings. After the 1979 revolution, continued threats of incarceration forced Ghulam into exile. He fled to Paris, where he lived and worked the remainder of his days, before passing away from cirrhosis of the liver at age 49. This is the grave of Gilbert Bécaud, another of France's beloved singer-songwriters. He was particularly known for romantic songs, including what is perhaps his best-known composition, What Now My Love, a hit in both Europe and America. The song would be covered by the likes of Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra. He wrote hits made popular by other artists as well, like Let It Be for the Everly Brothers and It Must Be Him for Vicky Carr. Gilbert was known as Monsieur 100,000 Volts for his energetic performances. He died from cancer at age 74. Moving into the columbarium here, we find the niche of Jacques Rochelle. He was an animator, regarded as something of a French Tex Avery. He's remembered for creating the animated television series Les Shadoks in 1968, which ran for more than 200 episodes and became culturally significant in France. Jacques lived to be 74. Manu Dibango was a talented saxophonist from Cameroon who merged styles of jazz and funk with traditional African music. He's credited with helping bring African music to the world. He gained international stardom with his 1972 hit Soul Makossa, which has become the most sampled African song in history. Manu died from COVID-19 at the age of 86. You fans of French literature know the name Marcel Proust. His best-known work is the monumental novel In Search of Lost Time, which was published in 7 parts between 1913 and 1927. The work consistently ranks among the greatest novels of the 20th century. Proust died before he was able to complete the final volumes, which were published posthumously by his brother. He was 51. The cause was pneumonia. Back to the columbarium, we find the niche of Max Ophüls. He ranks among Europe's great film directors of the 20th century. He began making films in Germany in the 30s. The rise of the Nazi Party in the late 30s drove Max, a Jew, out of Germany, where he fled to France and later the US. After the war, he began making films in Hollywood, including Letter from an Unknown Woman and The Exile with Douglas Fairbanks Jr. Back in France, he continued to make notable films, including Lola Montez, Les Plaisirs, and La Ronde, the latter 2 earning him Oscar nominations. Max died from heart failure at age 54. This is the grave of an entertainment power couple, Simone Signoret and Yves Montand. In 1960, Simone Signoret won the Oscar for Best Actress for her role in the film Room at the Top. This made her just the 2nd French actress, after Claudette Colbert, to win the honor. She would be nominated again years later for Ship of Fools. Other notable roles include the title character in Madame Rosa. Simone died from cancer at age 64. She was married to Yves Montand, who also rests here. Yves was a prominent actor and singer in France. He rose to fame as a crooner in Europe, then began making appearances in the US, on Broadway and in film. He starred in the European production Jean de Florette and the Hollywood production Let's Make Love alongside Marilyn Monroe. Yves died from a heart attack on set just after finishing his very last shots for IP5, The Island of Pachyderms. He was 70. You can't miss the grave of Tiki Holgado, which features a bike and a bust of the actor. Tiki was a French comic actor who appeared in close to 100 film and TV productions. His notable films include Delicatessen, Une époque formidable, and French Twist, the latter 2 earning him a César Award nomination. He's also remembered as the man in the photo from the international hit Amélie. Tiki died from lung cancer at age 59. Our next stop is Montparnasse. This is the grave of Serge Gainsbourg. He was a singer, songwriter, actor, and composer, considered one of the most important figures in French pop. His musical style was varied from jazz and chanson to funk and electronica. He wrote hundreds of songs, including Je t'aime, Moi non plus, and Bonnie and Clyde. He also wrote, directed, and contributed music for movies, like Anna, Equator, and Je t'aime, Moi non plus. Serge's music and movies were often inspired by his romantic muses, like Brigitte Bardot, Anna Karina, and perhaps most notably, Jane Birkin. Serge would be nominated for 5 César Awards for his film music, winning posthumously for Eliza. He died from a heart attack at age 62. He was the father of actress Charlotte Gainsbourg. His partner, actress Jane Birkin, who died in 2023, was laid to rest nearby alongside her daughter. According to some reports, a portion of her ashes may have also been interred here alongside Serge. Here too we find another power couple, Jacques Demy and Agnes Varda. Jacques Demy was a film director, a key figure of French New Wave. He's best known for his 2 musical films, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg and The Young Girls of Rochefort. Umbrellas was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including Best Writing, and Young Girls was nominated for Best Music. Jacques was married to Agnes Varda, also a director and writer. She rose to prominence in the 60s, writing and directing films like Cleo from 5 to 7, Happiness, and Vagabond. Agnes was also known for her documentary work. She was nominated for an Oscar for the 2017 documentary Faces Places. At the age of 89, she was the oldest person nominated for an Oscar. In 2018, she also became the first female director to win an honorary Oscar. Martin Scorsese once described her as one of the gods of cinema. She passed away from cancer at age 90. Next up is the tomb of an actress with a very cool last name, Mireille d'Arc. The model and actress was a fixture on French screens in the 60s and 70s. Among her best-known roles are in Weekend and The Tall Blonde with One Black Shoe. She would appear in some 80 films and TV shows throughout her career, and in 2006 was awarded the Legion of Honor. She died from complications of heart surgery at age 79. Also here is Samuel Beckett. He was an Irish writer who received global acclaim when he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature for his writing, which, in new forms for the novel and drama, in the destitution of modern man acquires its elevation. He wrote numerous novels, short stories, stage dramas, poetry, and even the odd TV and radio script. His writings offered a bleak, tragic comedy outlook on human existence. Perhaps his best-known work is the 1953 play Waiting for Godot. The play would be adapted on screen numerous times. Samuel died from emphysema at age 83. He requested his tomb be any color, so long as it's gray. Our next stop around the world is Italy, Il Bel Paese, home of my ancestors, and Hollywood Graveyard's composer, Giuseppe Vassapoli. Check out our 2 video tours we did here a few years back, featuring famous Italians from Michelangelo to Sergio Leone. We're back at one of my favorite cemeteries in the world, Cimitero Monumentale di Milano. Here in the Temple of Fame is the crypt of Carla Fracci. She was a prima ballerina, actress, and ballet director. She ranks among the greatest ballerinas of the 20th century, the lead dancer for years at La Scala Theatre Ballet in Milan. She also toured globally, dancing with companies in places like London and Sweden, paired with contemporary greats like Nureyev and Baryshnikov. She was particularly known for her performances in romantic ballets like Swan Lake and Romeo and Juliet. In addition to dancing, she would be known for directing ballet companies around Italy. She died from cancer at age 84 and would be the first woman honored with a crypt here in the Famedio, the Temple of Fame. Down in the crypt area we find Franco Corelli. He was an international superstar operatic tenor of the 1950s and 1960s, celebrated for his electrifying top notes, passionate singing, and charismatic stage presence. The impact of his voice was complemented by his stunning good looks and athletic physique, which led him to be nicknamed the Prince of Tenors. He delivered iconic moments in works like Tosca and Il Trovatore. He performed globally, but is known for a long partnership with the Metropolitan Opera in New York. He died at the age of 82 after suffering a stroke. His ashes are buried here alongside his wife. Outside, we find a monument to a man named Carlo Mozart. If the name is familiar to you, yes, Carl was the son of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Carl Thomas Mozart was the elder of the 2 surviving sons of the legendary composer. He moved to Milan to study music in 1805, but although he was considered a gifted pianist, he gave up music in favor of a commercial career. He became an official in the service of the Austrian financial administration and the government accounting departments in Milan. He never married and had no children, so the Mozart family line died with him. This plaque commemorates him as his original grave in a nearby cemetery in Milan was lost in the redevelopment of that area. Let's move on to Venice.
Venice.
This is Cimitero di San Michele, where Igor Stravinsky is laid to rest. Igor was a Russian-born composer, widely considered one of the most important and influential composers of the 20th century, and a pivotal figure in modernist music. Bucking the conventions of romantic music of the 19th century, Stravinsky's music was avant-garde with unconventional meters, harmonies, and rhythms. The young composer caught the eye of ballet impresario Sergei Diaghilev, who commissioned him to write music for the Ballet Russe. Here he would produce his best-known work, The Firebird, Petrushka, and the landmark Rite of Spring. When the Rite of Spring premiered in Paris in 1913, it caused a sensation and nearly a riot in the audience. The dissonant, edgy, and unconventional nature of Stravinsky's music have made it the perfect backdrop for cinema. Filmmakers either using his music directly or film composers imitating his style. And Time magazine would name him one of the 100 most influential people of the 20th century. Igor died in 1971 at age 88. Also here is a name familiar to you in the ballet world, Stravinsky's benefactor, Sergei Diaghilev. He's regarded as perhaps the greatest ballet director in history. He founded and ran Ballet Russe in 1909, a ballet company headquartered in Paris that toured and performed throughout the world. He helped elevate ballet to a higher art form, and his Ballet Russe was an incubator for some of the greatest artistic talents of the early 20th century. Not just dancers, but choreographers, composers, set decorators, and more. Diaghilev brought in the very best, from Pablo Picasso and Henri Matisse as set artists to Coco Chanel as costume designer. His productions were worldwide sensations. Sergei Diaghilev died from diabetes in 1929 at age 57. Here's one for you scientists, Christian Doppler. He was an Austrian mathematician and physicist who formulated the principle known as the Doppler effect. He observed that the perceived frequency of a wave depends on the relative speed of the source of the sound to the observer. You've heard this effect at the train station when a train's horn sounds higher in pitch as it approaches you, but lower in pitch as it moves away from you. That's because the sound waves are essentially being squished closer together as the train moves toward you, meaning a higher pitch, and the waves are farther apart as the train moves away from you, meaning a lower pitch. This effect also applies to light, where objects rapidly moving toward you are blue shifted, and rapidly moving away from you are red shifted. This is a valuable observation in astronomy. Christian Doppler died in 1853 from pulmonary disease. He was 49. Our journey takes us now to the beautiful coastal principality of Monaco. Here at the Cimetière de Monaco, we find an entertainer known as one of the most successful black women of her time, Josephine Baker. She was a dancer, singer, and actress born in America, but finding her greatest fame in Europe. As a teenager, she began performing on vaudeville, making her way to New York as part of the Harlem Renaissance, and eventually appearing on Broadway. In the 20s, she made her way to Paris to perform in revues. As a black woman in that era, she found Paris a much more welcoming environment than America. She quickly became a success with her erotic dancing, often appearing partially nude in those notorious Folies Bergère. She became famous for her iconic banana skirt costume and eventually rose to be the most successful American entertainer in France. In 1927, she made her feature film debut in Siren of the Tropics, and in 1934 would become the first black woman to star in the lead role in a major motion picture, Zuzu. Dubbed the Black Venus, Josephine Baker was an indelible icon of the jazz age. As a civil rights activist, she refused to perform in segregated clubs in the US. And during the war, she aided in the French resistance. She would socialize with the Germans in nightclubs, charming them while secretly gathering information from them. Josephine Baker died from a cerebral hemorrhage at age 68 and was laid to rest here. In May 2021, French President Macron announced that Josephine Baker would be honored with a tomb in the historic Pantheon in Paris, where the giants of French history are entombed, like Victor Hugo and Voltaire. She was just the 6th woman given such a high honor, and the first black woman. However, Josephine's family decided that her physical remains would not be transferred to the new tomb and would remain in Monaco. She would be honored with a cenotaph in the Pantheon, containing a symbolic casket with soil from various locations where Josephine had lived: St. Louis, Paris, southern France, and Monaco. Along a wall overlooking the city of Monaco and the sea off in the distance, we find the final resting place of Sir Roger Moore. The London-born actor made his mark in the 70s and 80s when he became the 4th man to portray secret agent James Bond on the big screen. His 7 appearances as Bond include the films Live and Let Die, The Spy Who Loved Me, Octopussy, and more. Roger Moore is tied with Sean Connery for most appearances as Bond.
In our business, and your people get killed. We both know that.
He was also familiar to television audiences as Beau Maverick on Maverick, and playing the Saint, which is alluded to right here on his grave. In 1991, Roger Moore was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II for his services to charity. He died from cancer at age 89. How about next we make our first ever trip on this channel to Greece? Here in Athens is the First Cemetery of Athens, where quite a few notable Greeks are laid to rest. Let's meet a few of them, accompanied by this friendly Greek tortoise. First up here we find the grave of Melina Mercouri. She was one of Greece's most prominent actresses. She received an Academy Award nomination and won a Cannes Film Festival Award for Best Actress for her performance in the 1960 film Never on Sunday. Other notable films include Phaedra and Topkapi, which earned her Golden Globe nominations.
I am a fifth. Honest.
She also had a notable stage career, appearing in plays like Sweet Bird of Youth and Ilya Darling, which earned her a Tony nomination. Later in life, she dedicated herself to activism and politics, becoming the first woman appointed as Minister for Culture of Greece. She died from cancer at age 73. Resting alongside Melina is her husband, Jules Dassin. He was a filmmaker, a frequent collaborator with Melina. Jules was an American-born film and theater director and producer. A subject of the Hollywood blacklist, despite not being a communist, he moved to France and later Greece, where he continued his career. Jules was nominated for 2 Oscars, both for Never on Sunday, for Best Writing and Best Director. He directed other films starring his wife, Phaedra and Topkapi, the latter serving as the inspiration for Mission Impossible. He's also known for his work in theater, earning 2 Tony nominations for the Broadway production Ilya Darling. Jules lived to be 96. Next up here we find the grave of Katina Paxinou. She too ranks among the greatest actresses to come out of Greece. She had an outstanding career on stage here as a member of the National Theatre of Greece. The outbreak of World War II drove her first to the UK, then to the US, where she continued her career. She made her film debut in 1943's For Whom the Bell Tolls, for which she won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, for her very first film. Other notable films include The Inheritance, Morning Becomes Electra, and Prince of Foxes. She returned to Greece in the 50s, making films in Europe like Rocco and His Brothers. Katina died from cancer at age 72 in 1973. In 1960, she was honored with a star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame. Katina rests alongside her husband, Alexis Minotis, also an actor. He rose to prominence in the theater, performing in the works of Shakespeare and Ibsen and directing ancient Greek tragedies. Together with his wife, they founded the Royal Theatre of Athens. He made a few movies as well, including Hitchcock's Notorious and The Chase, alongside Bob Cummings and Peter Lorre. He died in 1990 at age 92. This is the grave of Theo Angelopoulos. He was a filmmaker and director, highly decorated in the festival circuit, including winning the Palme d'Or at Cannes for his film Eternity and a Day, and the Jury Grand Prize for his film Ulysses Gaze. He's also known for his trilogy of films about the history of Greece. Theo lived to be 76. Our last Greece stop was an Englishman resting here in Greece, T.H. White. He was born in Bombay, India, and educated in England, where he would hone his craft as a writer. He's best known today for his Arthurian novels, published together in 1958 as The Once and Future King. One of the most memorable in this series is The Sword in the Stone. It would serve as the basis for the Disney film of the same name and inspire other writers like J.K. Rowling and her Harry Potter series. And those of you with a keen eye will have spotted a sword carved right into the stone here on his grave. White died from heart failure at age 57 while aboard a ship in Greece. Let's bid farewell to Greece and say hello to Hungary. This is the national graveyard in Fiumei Street in Budapest, home to an international star of Hungarian birth, Zsa Zsa Gabor. She was an actress and socialite, well loved and remembered as the vivacious, beautiful blonde with a thick accent. She and her mother and sisters, including actress Zsa Gabor, fled Hungary during the war and came to the US, where she became a sought-after actress with European flair. She began appearing in films in the 50s, including Lovely to Look At and Moulin Rouge, in which she co-starred alongside Jose Ferrer.
What is wrong with me, Ori? Other women find love and happiness. I find only disenchantment.
Other films include Queen of Outer Space and Touch of Evil. She quickly became known for her extravagant Hollywood lifestyle, as much a socialite as an actress. Because of this, in later years, she often appeared on screen as herself, or a version of herself. The inscription on her stone here is not Hungarian. It's the phonetic spelling of her catchphrase, darling, her term of endearment delivered in that iconic accent. Zsa Zsa Gabor died in 2016, just shy of her 100th birthday. A portion of her ashes was interred with her sister Ava at Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles, but it was her last wish to return to Hungary and be laid to rest here. So in 2021, her husband had her ashes taken to Hungary on their own first-class seat with champagne and caviar, placed in a Gucci bag, and interred here in her native land. Also here is a noted Hungarian filmmaker named Miklos Jancsó. He achieved international acclaim for his films Hungarian Rhapsody, Electra, My Love, and Red Psalm, all of which were nominated for the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. He would also win Best Director for Red Psalm. Other notable films include 1967's The Red and the White. Miklos lived to be 92. This is the tomb of another notable Miklos, Miklos Radnati. He is considered one of the most important Hungarian poets of the 20th century. He published his first collection of verse in 1930. His second collection in 1931, Song of New-Fashioned Shepherds, was banned by the government for subversion. At the outbreak of World War II, he was conscripted into a Jewish labor battalion. Fearing for his life as a Jew during the Holocaust, he and his wife converted to the Roman Catholic faith. This would not save him, though, as he continued to be a part of the Hungarian Jewish slave laborers, often made to work under inhumane conditions, under fear of being deported to concentration camps. In 1944, he was part of a forced 70-mile march with other prisoners who were starved, randomly beaten, or executed. During this trying time, he scribbled his last poem, Postcard 4. In November, he and 21 other prisoners were executed and buried in a mass grave. After the war, the mass grave was exhumed, including Radnati, who was reburied here in the Jewish cemetery along with the other victims. His memoir, Under Gemini, was published in English in 1985. The 1989 film Forced March was inspired by his story. Our global grave hunting adventure takes us to our first ever visit to Ukraine. This is Lychakiv Cemetery in Lviv. Here we find this uniquely beautiful monument to Solomaya Krushelnitska. She was an operatic soprano, one of the brightest stars of early 20th century opera. During her life, she was recognized as one of the most outstanding singers in the world, tackling some of opera's most challenging roles, including the works of Wagner and Puccini. She toured globally, but spent much of her time in Italy, often performing in Milan. Solomaya died in 1952 at age 80. In 2000, the Lviv Theatre of Opera and Ballet was officially renamed the Solomaya Krushelnitska State Academic Theatre of Opera and Ballet. This grand monument commemorates Ivan Franko. He was a poet, writer, and activist here in Ukraine. A pioneer of Ukrainian literature, he wrote the first detective novels and modern poetry in Ukraine. His writings dealt with Ukrainian nationalism and the plight of the working class, espousing basic human rights. Ivan also translated the works of others into Ukrainian, like Shakespeare, Alighieri, and Hugo. His grave depicts a stone breaker, which alludes to his most famous poem, Kamenieri. In the poem, slaves bound by chains smash through rocks using sledgehammers. We break down the stones, it says, level the path of truth, and everyone's happiness will come through our very bones. The stonecutter has since become a revolutionary symbol in Ukraine. Franco died in poverty in 1916 at age 59. As we say goodbye to Ukraine, we send our love to all our friends there during this difficult time. In another first on this channel, we find ourselves now in Israel. This is the Safed Old Jewish Cemetery, one of the oldest in Israel. Here we find the grave of Rabbi Isaac Luria, known as the Ari, his grave painted in the traditional blue color of holy men. He was a rabbi and Jewish mystic, considered the father of contemporary Kabbalah. He lived and preached in the 1500s, and though he wrote down very few of his teachings, they were written down and published by his followers, and became generally known by Jews throughout Europe in the 17th century. And perhaps in the same spirit as Hollywood Graveyard, Luria would regularly visit the graves of important Jewish scholars. He was just 38 when he died during the epidemic in 1572. To this day, devotees of Kabbalah make pilgrimages here to his grave. Crossing the globe, we land in Malaysia. This is St. Michael Catholic Cemetery in Perak, where we find the grave of Sybil Kathigasu. She was a nurse who is remembered today for her ardent support of the resistance during Japanese occupation of Malaysia during World War II. Known as Edith of Malaysia, she and her husband opened a clinic during the war to supply medicines and medical services to resistance fighters. She would be arrested and tortured for her efforts, but refused to disclose any information on the resistance to the Japanese. She was sentenced to life in prison, but liberated after the war. She is the only Malaysian woman to ever be awarded the George Medal for Bravery, a decoration of the United Kingdom for gallantry. She died in 1948 at age 48. Her death was believed to have been attributed to a wound from the war, which later led to septicemia. She was originally interred in Scotland, but a year later her body was returned to Malaysia and laid to rest here. Our next stop here is Chengal Muslim Cemetery in Pahang. Here lies Sudirman. He was a singer and songwriter, among Asia's most popular music artists in the 1980s. He'd be known as the singing lawyer and the Elvis Presley of Malaysia. He recorded 15 albums and numerous compilations with hits like Salam Terakhir. In 1989, he was named Asia's #1 performer during a singing competition in London. Sudirman was also a writer, cartoonist, and even acted in a film called Cami. In 1991, he was hospitalized after collapsing while singing. He suffered for several months from pneumonia, passing away at the age of 37. We now head to Nirvana Memorial Park in Kuala Lumpur. Here is the grave of Bai Guang. She was a Chinese singer who, by the 40s, was one of the top singing stars in China. She was also an actress. Her stage name derived from her desire to be like beams of light coming off the big screen, her name translating as White Light. As a singer, she became known as the Queen of the Low Voice, with hit songs like Autumn Evening and Waiting for You. She made her big screen debut in 1938's The Road to Peace in the Orient, and after moving to Hong Kong, starred in films like A Forgotten Woman. From the 50s, she lived in Japan, then Malaysia, performing in nightclubs and recording music. Bai Guang died from colon cancer at age 78. Her tomb also features this distinctive piano. Turning the compass northwest, we arrive in Taiwan to find another prominent Asian singer. This is Chin Po San Cemetery, where Teresa Tang is laid to rest. She was a singer and actress, beloved as the eternal queen of Asian pop. Today she's recognized as one of the most successful and influential Asian pop singers of all time. She recorded more than 1,700 songs throughout her career in the 70s and 80s, recording in multiple languages. Her hits include Sweet as Honey and The Moon Represents My Heart. Teresa is credited for helping bridge cultural gaps across Chinese-speaking nations and even Japan by singing Japanese pop songs. In the 1980s, her songs were banned in China for several years due to political tensions. However, she remained popular in mainland China due to its black market. In 1995, Teresa died suddenly and unexpectedly while on holiday in Thailand. She was just 42. Her death was attributed to a severe asthma attack, but a cause of death has never been confirmed. Her death caused a unified sense of loss across Asia, and today she's still remembered as one of Asia's brightest stars. In 1986, she was named by Time magazine as one of the world's 7 greatest female singers. Let's head down under and spend some more time with our friends in Australia. This is North Road Cemetery in Nailsworth, where we find the grave of Hayden Bunton. He's regarded as one of the greatest Australian rules footballers who ever lived. He played 119 games for Fitzroy in the Victorian Football League, which today is the Australian Football League, from 1931 to 1937 and in 1942. Bunton became a star during the Great Depression, regarded as a highly skilled and fair player who displayed grace and speed on the football field. He became the first player to win the Brownlow Medal 3 times, equivalent to league MVP. Bunton was critically injured in a car crash in 1955 and died 4 days later, at the age of 44. His grave remained unmarked for decades until a football fan pushed to have a marker placed here on the grave, which was installed in 2015. Another notable Australian sports figure rests here, Clem Hill. He was an Australian international cricketer, considered one of Australia's greatest left-handed batsmen. He played his first-class match for South Australia at 16 years old, and in 1896 was selected as part of the Australian team to tour England at 19. He would play 49 test matches and captained Australia from 1910 to 1912. In May 1945, Hill fell while trying to board a tram in Melbourne, suffering serious head injuries. Despite responding well to treatment, he developed a serious heart condition following the incident and died on September 5th, with chronic valvular disease cited as the cause of death. Clem Hill was inducted into the Australian Cricket Hall of Fame in 2005. West Terrace Cemetery is our next stop. Here is the grave of Percy Grainger, a world-famous composer and pianist. He was born in Australia, but later went to study and perform in Germany, London, and eventually the US. He's particularly known for his work with English folk melodies, including what is perhaps his best-known work, an arrangement of Country Gardens. Grainger was also something of a music innovator, working to develop music machines that predated electronic synthesizers and were intended to supersede human interpretation. His eccentricities were reflected in his musical compositions and arrangements, including the use of rare instruments like the theremin, meter freeform music, and one performance which used 19 pianos and 30 pianists. Grainger died at the age of 78. Our next stop is Fremantle Cemetery in Western Australia. In a previous video here, we found AC/DC legend Bon Scott. Let's walk along the Heritage Trail and see who else we can find. Here lies Moondine Joe. He was Western Australia's most infamous bushranger, an escaped convict who used the bush as refuge to hide from British authorities. Joe's criminal career began in 1849 in Wales when he was sentenced to 10 years for stealing food. He was soon transferred to the British penal colony in Western Australia to serve out his sentence. Here he became famous, not for his crimes, but his numerous escapes from capture and prison. His life became a cycle of escapes and recaptures, including escaping from a fortified cell built specifically for him at Fremantle Prison. His exploits have become part of Australian lore and romanticized in verse, song, and fiction. Moondine Joe died in an asylum at age 74. The inscription here on his stone is Welsh for freedom. Next up is Melbourne General Cemetery. Here lies a talented musician named Greg Ham. He was a member of the Australian new wave rock band Men at Work in the 80s, playing flute, sax, and keyboards. Their hits include Who Can It Be Now and that quintessentially Australian song, Down Under, in which he played some funky flute.
I come from a land down under.
song topped the charts not only in Australia, but hit number 1 here in the US in 1983 and gets radio airplay to this day. Also in '83, the group won a Grammy Award for Best New Artist. In April 2012, Greg was found dead in his home from an apparent heart attack. He was just 58. We're now in Lutwyche Cemetery in Queensland at the grave of pioneering musician Buddy Williams. Known as the Yodeling Jackaroo, Buddy was the first Australian to record country music in Australia. His songs were about the life and times in the Australian bush, known as bush ballads. He recorded and performed from the 30s all the way into the 80s and would inspire generations of Australian country musicians to follow. He lived to be 68. Mount Thompson Memorial Gardens is just outside of Brisbane, with a nice view of the city off in the distance. Let's avoid a face full of Australian spiderweb to arrive at the grave of Derek Guyler. He was an English actor known for playing short-tempered characters in British sitcoms. Notable among these are as Norman Potter in the sitcom Please Sir and Constable Turnbull on Sykes. You also saw him as the police inspector in the Beatles' A Hard Day's Night. Derek passed away in 1999 at age 85. This is Brighton General Cemetery in Victoria. Here lies a man named Squizzy Taylor. He was perhaps Australia's first notorious gangster of the 19-teens and 20s. He became a regular feature in the headlines of Melbourne during this era, with crimes ranging from pickpocketing, assault, extortion, robbery, prostitution, bootlegging, gambling, and murder. He managed to elude conviction for the worst of these offenses, but eventually got 6 months in prison for harboring another criminal. After his release, tensions rose with other gangsters, and he was wounded in a gunfight with one of them. He was taken to the hospital but died a short time later at age 39. A movie was made about his life in 1982. Ducks welcome us to Springvale Botanical Cemetery in Victoria. Here is Bud Tingwell. The noted Australian actor appeared in more than 170 film and television productions in his career. You fans of the Miss Marple murder mystery films of the 60s will remember him as Inspector Craddock in 4 of these films. He's also known for his role as Dr. Alan Dawson in the British television series Emergency Ward 10. Other notable films include 1980's Breaker Morant and 2003's Ned Kelly. Bud died from cancer at age 86. Also here we find Tommy Woodcock. He was a racehorse trainer and handler of the thoroughbred racehorse Far Lap. Together, Tommy and Far Lap achieved incredible success in the late 20s and 30s. Winning all the major races in Australia, at the peak of their career, Far Lap was the 3rd highest stakes winner in the world. And for the people of Australia, during the Great Depression, Far Lap was something of a national hero and a symbol of hope and inspiration during a very trying time. But in 1932, Far Lap was struck with a sudden and mysterious illness and died at the age of 5. Some believe he may have been poisoned. Following his death, Far Lap's heart was donated to the Institute of Anatomy in Canberra, and his skeleton went to the New Zealand National Museum in Wellington. Here at the Melbourne Museum, you can see Far Lap's hide preserved as a taxidermy mount. This is Lilydale Lawn Cemetery. And this is the grave of Dame Nellie Melba. She was an operatic soprano who became one of the most famous singers of the late Victorian era and early 20th century. Nellie is considered the first Australian woman to achieve international recognition as a classical musician. After getting her start here in Australia, she studied further in Paris and soon established herself as a leading soprano in London, then elsewhere in Europe and New York. Growing to one of the most popular sopranos in the world, she'd use her clout to hold concerts to raise funds for the war effort during the First World War. She was also among the first singers to make recordings and participate in radio broadcasts. Nellie would also become a noted teacher of the next generation of singers here in Australia. She died at the age of 69 from septicemia. Today, Dame Nellie Melba's likeness is featured on the Australian $100 bill. We'll wrap up our time in Australia at Woronora Memorial Park in Sydney. Here we find the grave of Victoria Shaw. She began her career as a model, then moved into acting. Named Most Promising Newcomer at the Golden Globes for her role in her Hollywood debut, the 1956 film The Eddie Duchin Story. She'd go on to star in The Crimson Kimono and played the medieval queen in 1973's Westworld. She also made guest appearances on shows like 77 Sunset Strip, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and Charlie's Angels. Victoria was just 53 when she died from emphysema. Our final stops of the day take us to South America. First up, Uruguay, or Uruguay as we say here. This is Cementerio Central in Montevideo. Here is the crypt of Gerardo Matos Rodriguez. Also known as Becho, he was a Uruguayan musician and composer. He's remembered for composing what is perhaps the most famous classic tango of all time, La Cumparsita, written in 1916. You're listening to it right now, and you've often heard it in film when actors are dancing the tango, including in Sunset Boulevard when Gloria Swanson and William Holden danced the tango.
It's 10:15. What time are they supposed to get here?
Who?
The other guests.
There are no other guests.
Gerardo composed other tangos as well, but La Cumparsita remains his greatest triumph. He passed away from an illness in 1948 at age 51. Also here we find Mario Benedetti. He was an author and poet, considered one of Latin America's most important writers of the 20th century. He was part of the Generation of 45, a Uruguayan intellectual and literary movement. For 12 years he lived in exile when a military dictatorship ruled Uruguay. He returned in 1985 following the restoration of democracy. He wrote numerous novels, short stories, and books of poetry, for which he was honored with numerous awards and distinctions. His book, La Tregua, was translated into 20 languages and was made into the 1974 film The Truce. Mario passed away in 2009 at age 88 after suffering respiratory problems. His epitaph is an excerpt from his poem Defender la Alegría. It translates as, "Defend joy as a trench, defend it from scandal and routine, from misery and the miserable, from temporary absences and from definitive ones." Our last stop of the day is beautiful Argentina. Along this row of family tombs in Chacarita Cemetery in Buenos Aires, we find Oscar Bonavena. He was an Argentine professional heavyweight boxer, a top contender with a career record of 58 wins, 9 losses, and 1 draw. He was nicknamed Ringo for his Beatles haircut and found success in both Argentina and the United States. In 1968, he faced Joe Frazier for the heavyweight title in Philadelphia. After 15 grueling rounds, Oscar lost by decision. 2 years later, he faced Muhammad Ali in another hard-fought bout, going 15 rounds, but suffering a TKO with less than 2 minutes remaining. In 1976, Bonavena was enjoying some leisure time at the Mustang Ranch brothel in Nevada when an altercation broke out with the owner. He was shot dead by the security guard at the age of 33. His body lie in state at the Luna Park Sports Arena in Buenos Aires, where 150,000 people filed by to pay their respects. We head into the mausoleum for our next stop here. Meet Gustavo Cerati, a talented musician, considered a key figure in Ibero-American and Latin American rock. The singer-songwriter rose to prominence in the 80s as the frontman of the rock band Soda Stereo. They had a number of hits, including De Musica Ligera. Gustavo also found success as a solo artist, and throughout his career sold millions of albums and won accolades, including a Latin Grammy. Billboard also ranked him 33rd on their list of greatest rock singers of all time. But his career was cut short in 2010 after suffering a stroke, which left him in a coma. 4 years later, he died from cardiac arrest at the age of 55. And finally, we visit the ornate monument to Carlos Gardel, who might just hold the record for number of individual plaques on his grave. He is recognized throughout the world as the greatest tango singer of all time, the king of tango, El Zorzel. His rich baritone can be heard on hundreds of tango recordings. He would also pen a few classic tangos himself. His music can be heard in films like Frida, and his popularity led to appearances in a number of films as well, like The Big Broadcast of 1936. But on June 24, 1935, he died in an airplane crash at the age of 44. Carlos became a tragic hero in Latin America, with thousands lining up to pay their respects as his casket made its way through Colombia, New York, and Rio de Janeiro before arriving back home in Buenos Aires. And that concludes our tour. What are some of your favorite memories of the stars we visited today? Share them in the comments below, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more famous grave tours. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.